Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth. Written by the Hanged Man 317 and read by Purple Star. Chapter 35. Electricity, Gravity, and the Quirks of Hair Care. Era had the first match. It hadn't really hit her before, when she'd been running a race outside of the stadium or caught up in forming strategies with her team, but seeing them start to build that stage at the center of the arena really hammered it home. No more hiding. This was it. The damage was done, and there was no going back. Era was not afraid, necessarily. Pensive. Nervous, even? Through the mindless games they put on between rounds, the food and the friendly conversation, the only thing she could think about was standing alone on that stage for the whole world to see.
Did you really think you could escape me, little bird?
At least around the other she could ignore it. Put it in a box and shove that box towards the back of her mind. But when it came time for her to head towards the staging area, to sit alone in a little room and wait for her name to be called, everything was tumbling out. She was made of run away, and walls closing in, and can't wash out, won't wash out. Her stomach twisted with a need to prove to herself that she could do this, could stand on her own, could win. No weakness. Even here, she felt her jaw clench, mouth settling into a grim line as she slowly rose and made her way towards the arena. If she was going to expose herself like this, then she'd better make it count. She'd prove that she was strong. Too strong for petty threats and attempts at abduction. Era blinked, and she was at the arena, looking out from the side tunnels towards the roaring crowd and the flashing lights of endless cameras. Fuck. She'd never worked like this. She was for shadows and dark alleys and quiet hallways, not raucous crowds around a limelight stage. No fear. No weakness. She pressed the mask tightly to her face and prayed that it would not splinter.
And now, everyone, it's the main event! The thing you've all been waiting for? Let me hear it for the final round of the Sports Festival!
Present Mike's booming voice echoed through the entrance tunnel, accompanied by an impossibly loud uproar throughout the stadium. Steeling herself, Era stepped out onto the grass.
All right, folks. First up, from Class 1A, we have the electrifying sensation, Kaminari Denki.
Right. Kaminari. Era just barely recognized the blonde-haired boy from the USJ incident, where apparently he'd managed to fry an entire field of villains. Did she have a strategy here? Was she supposed to? Fuck. The crowd was so loud. 1,000 eyes burning into her skin.
Find a mask and tie it tight.
It was slipping. She needed to.
Versus! You know her as the girl with a wicked gun and an even wickeder aim. It's Suzuki Era from General Studies.
Oh, that was her. Era felt herself stepping onto the stage, blinked and found herself standing at the center, about a foot from Kaminari, who was sporting a lopsided grin. "Hey, no hard feelings, right?" he called, widening his stance into something that could generously be called fighting ready, had he been a drunken toddler.
What are they teaching these kids?
Era just snorted, shifting her own weight backwards. Her eyes narrowed, as did her focus, the world sharpening to a knife's edge of here and now, of the steady thrum of her heart and the twitch of her fingers.
Walls closing in, can't breathe, can't breathe.
She did. It was just her and her opponent. Nothing else mattered.
Begin!
This is gonna be over quick, honey. Arcing bursts of electricity danced across Kaminari's skin. Indiscriminate shock! 1.3 million volts! Right. She did not have a plan. This was so counter to her usual style. No cover, no places to hide and lurk and strike from the shadows. No way to wait for weaknesses to reveal themselves and...
That kind of stings.
Era felt her jaw clench, her limbs lock. The edges of her clothes began to sizzle as sharp jolts of lightning coursed through her body. Her head ached with fuzzy static, full-body tingles following the racking electricity as her nerves mended themselves beneath her skin. For a brief, agonizing moment, she was...
You control the pain, little bird. You make it stop.
She was...
Don't give them the satisfaction.
She was twitching in fitful bursts against restraints that bit so deep into her flesh that thick drops of crimson rolled down to hang heavy at her fingertips. And then it was over. Era felt herself nearly collapse out of the limb lock, stumbling back into her stance as she brought up her arms in preparation for another blow. Blinking sparks from her eyes, she slowly straightened when it became obvious that Kaminari had no intention of attacking her again. In fact, it seemed like he was halfway through wandering out of the ring himself. Shinsou had mentioned something about him shorting out, but this seemed dangerous. Was his quirk affecting his own brain in some way? Era could heal that damage, but for anyone else... With a sigh, Era walked forward and grabbed the boy by the arm, gently pushing him out of the ring and repressing the urge to wince at Midnight's announcement. Kaminari is out of bounds. Suzuki wins. The stadium was not uproarious, as her victory had been pretty apparent from the moment Kaminari short-circuited himself, but still it was loud enough to make Era want to bring her shoulder up to her ears, to curl away from the noise with a pitiful whimper.
No weakness.
Era grinned up at the crowd, letting it slip into something feral as she exited the stadium and made her way back through the halls, towards the stands for general studies. Shinsou gave her a lazy nod as she sat down next to him, his face splitting into a strange grin as he turned to give her a more appraising look.
Quick match. Good job. Your, hair's a little messed up, though.
What? She reached up to run a hand over her head, but not before Shinsou had pulled out his phone and snapped a picture, turning it around so she could see. Her hair was all on end, standing up straight with the dregs of lingering static. Scowling, Era tugged her fingers through it in the hopes of forcing it flat once more. It almost looked like... Her frown turned to a toothy smile of her own.
Wow. We could be twins.
Shut up. My hair doesn't look like that. Defensive? You know, I didn't really see it before, but really, with my hair like this, we are. Fuck you. Shinsou huffed, tucking his phone back into his pocket. This is styled. That is just a mess. What, do you cut it yourself? Era shot him an incredulous look. Yes? How else?
What?
He seemed to be at a loss, expression melting from disdain to pure confusion.
Like always? Have you never been to a hairdresser?
She was not going to ask what that was. She could definitely figure it out for herself, but were there really people whose sole purpose was to cut the hair of others? What a waste. She'd assumed that kind of thing was reserved for crime bosses and Yakuza leaders, the exorbitantly wealthy who had nothing better to do than spend their money on frivolous frippery. But Shinsou certainly did not fall into that category. And he seemed so confused. Fuck. She hadn't answered fast enough. "You've never been to a hairdresser," he said simply, reaching forward as if to touch her hair. Era batted his hand to the side in ill-concealed frustration. "Why would I need to? I'm perfectly capable of cutting it myself." In fact, it was getting a little long again. She could feel it settling on the nape of her neck, growing long enough to grab and tangle and twist. She'd need to cut it soon. Shinsou just gave a short laugh. "Is that what you call perfectly capable? Fuck, I thought you were just acting out some sort of teenage rebellion." "Look, it's not going to be at its best when I've just had 1,000,000 volts of electricity through my system." Shinsou's nose wrinkled. "Wait, actually? Shouldn't you see Recovery Girl?" "I'm fine," said Era hastily. "Probably an exaggeration, but you get it. My hair's perfectly functional." She couldn't believe she was having this conversation with someone whose hair was both purple and seemed to curl straight upward in a mess of waves. Although, come to think of it, his hair never actually looked frizzy. "Holy shit." Era brought a hand to her face. You do this on purpose? That's your choice?" It's supposed to look messy," Shinsou spluttered. "Look, it's like, just roll out of bed kind of." "But on purpose." Era's hair was a product of just rolling out of bed. Perhaps running her fingers through it a few times to tug out some of the tangles. She didn't have the time for anything more, and besides, it wasn't as if it fucking mattered. "How long does it take you?" "This isn't." "How long?" asked Era hoarsely, covering her eyes. Shinsou sighed, looked down at the arena, found that they were still setting up the next match, looked back up. "I also do a skincare routine." "A what?" "What do you mean, a what?" "What the fuck is a skincare routine?" "How do you not know what that is?" "I'm sorry if I don't waste my time on shit like that." "Well, it's not like I'm sleeping anyway. I mean, I have to do something to fill the time." "What?" That was ridiculous. Why would he not be sleeping if it wasn't for the purpose of doing something, of fulfilling one task or another? Did he really have to make work for himself? Era was drowning in it as it was. "Wait, what?" Shinsou blinked back at her, their playful feud forgotten for the moment. "I thought you had insomnia too." Insomnia. Something she'd definitely heard before, but for some reason she felt like he meant more by it. So many new words today. She could certainly puzzle this one out. Sometimes Nyx would complain about insomnia keeping them up at night, as if it were some kind of physical barrier to sleep. They'd whine about how ironic it was that their name was Nyx and they couldn't manage to get some fucking shut-eye and,
Katori, I'm too fucking tired for your shit today, so you better get this right the first time, or...
Right. Okay. Put it in a box. Fine. "You can't sleep?" asked Era at last, just when it seemed like Shinsou was going to speak again. "Like, at all? Even when there's nothing you need to do?" Sometimes Era found herself unwilling to sleep, to surrender herself to the nightmares she knew were to come. Did Shinsou have nightmares? The thought of it made her chest seize, with something strange and sickly.
Yeah? That's what insomnia is?
Shinsou rubbed at the back of his neck.
I thought you had it too. I mean, you always look so tired all the time, and you're never paying attention in class.
I don't sleep, but I don't think that's insomnia. I just have things to do. Shinsou raised a brow.
Things to do? Like what?
Like homework. Why can't you sleep? If he noticed her clumsy deflection, he didn't comment on it, instead shrugging and glancing down at the arena once more.
Just not tired, I guess. I have pills for it, but they don't always work.
Era was tired all the time. It was like a numbing exhaustion was constantly gnawing at her bones, no matter how much rest she got. If she surrendered to it, she was sure she could collapse, unconscious whenever she pleased. That was very rarely a good idea. She had self-control.
I'm sorry.
He shrugged again.
Nothing to be done about it. But don't think I've forgotten.
Shinsou jabbed an accusatory finger in her direction.
You are a disaster.
Wow,
bold observation,
said Era dryly.
You ever considered becoming an information hero? Shut up. Oh, wait. It looks like they're ready for the next fight.
Midoriya and Uraraka. Any bets? Era squinted, just managing to catch the barest details of Midoriya's face. He looked nervous, but determined. Uraraka looked much the same.
I don't know. Kind of sucks that they have to fight so early, though.
Era couldn't help but agree. Of all the kids in the festival, other than Shinsou, of course, she had most been rooting for the 1A kids who had been helping her keep up with schoolwork. Or the study crew, as Uraraka had begun to call it. Every single member of that group had made it to the final round, but it was only Midoriya and Uraraka who had to face off against each other from the very beginning. Present Mike's voice interrupted her train of thought, echoing throughout the stadium once more to raucous applause.
Everybody put your hands up for round 2! Up next we have 2 teammates from the cavalry battle, both with a tendency for flying through the air. From the hero course, Midoriya Izuku and Ochiko Uraraka.
Why does he always have to be so loud? Grumbled Era, rubbing at her ears.
Shinsou laughed.
Well, the microphone is probably helping.
No, it's not the volume, it's... She waved her hand in the air noncommittally. He's just loud.
You make no sense sometimes.
Only sometimes? I need to step up my game. They quieted down as the match was about to start, and Era rose a little from her seat to get a better view. Midoriya and Uraraka. It was an interesting matchup. From what she'd seen of Midoriya's quirk, he could be a little unpredictable. A heavy hitter at great personal cost, and very little control. He seemed to get some kind of handle on it in the cavalry battle, but, well, at the end of the day, his power broke his bones. That wasn't optimal. Uraraka was a little easier to get a beat on, although to what end Era wasn't sure. Her quirk was touch-based, all 5 fingers. Obviously, the most logical course of action would be for her to try and get a hand on Midoriya. And he didn't exactly have anything that could keep her at range, although those blasts of wind might do something to keep her away, if he could land them. As it was, he seemed to need the time to charge up his attacks, at the very least a few seconds, and that was plenty of time for Uraraka to land a hand on him. And once that happened, well,
Nothing would be able to keep him in the ring at that point. It was all a matter of who could hit first. If Uraraka could close the distance, then Midoriya would be too preoccupied with dodging her hands to fire off a real blast. If she couldn't, then Midoriya would be able to knock her out of the ring immediately.
Begin!
Uraraka rushed towards Midoriya, who had already raised his hand, fingers crackling as he prepared for a flick.
Too slow.
Uraraka swiped a hand towards him, and he stumbled backwards, energy dissipating in arcs of electricity. First point to Uraraka, which meant this match was about to get interesting. Midoriya ducked beneath another swing, spinning around to land an elbow in Uraraka's back before trying to dart away across the stage. But Uraraka recovered quickly from her stumble and refused to let him make any space. She closed in with another swipe, which he narrowly avoided, and a brutal punch to the gut that made Era suck in a breath between her teeth. Midoriya doubled over, barely managing to sidestep another open-palmed strike while throwing up his hand in a last-ditch effort to charge up another blast. Era could tell that was a mistake before he even tried it. But to be fair to him, there wasn't much else to be done. They were pretty evenly matched in skill, although skill was being generous. Seriously, what was Eraserhead teaching them? And that gave Uraraka the distinct advantage in terms of win condition. As expected, in the brief moment it took him to ready his strike, Uraraka managed to slap all 5 fingers onto his arm, throwing him into the air just as a blast of energy exploded from his fingers in an impressive display of power. Midoriya was a green blur as he flew from the ring, crashing into an arena wall before slowly drifting back towards the center. Uraraka flew as well, although a faint pink glow indicated that she'd managed to use her quirk, keeping herself afloat while she soared from the ring and bounced against the concrete wall.
It's whoever hits the ground first, right?
Murmured Era.
Which means...
Uraraka slapped her hands together, and both of them dropped. Hastily, she reapplied her quirk to herself, only releasing it when Midoriya crumpled to the ground. Based on the big screen, she looked a little queasy, but still managed to stand and give Midoriya a shaky bow. The boy now clutched at a broken finger, shooting her a smile, even while looking beyond disappointed.
Well, that was something,
said Shinsou simply, glancing up at the display of the bracket.
I think I'm on deck. I'm gonna head down to the waiting room. Want me to come with? Asked Era, gaze still fixed on the arena. From the corner of her eye, she caught him shooting her an appraising glance, before standing with a shake of his head. I'm good on my own. It'll give me a chance to think of some nasty things to call Bakugou. Remember to point out that we beat him in the cavalry battle, she said as he walked away. Oh, that's on the list. Don't worry.
Shinsou gave a soft chuckle.
Let's hope he takes the bait. He will. Don't worry. You're going to win.
Another odd look.
Was her hair still frizzy from the static? She was pretty sure she'd gotten it to lay flat, but... Is that good luck an era? He asked dryly. She scoffed. You don't need luck. Luck never helped anybody. You have all the tools, just use them correctly. Thanks? Hey, you got this. Just keep a level head. He sighed before shooting her a wry grin. Thanks, Era. See you in the ring. Era's smile turned feral. I look forward to it. She watched him head off to the waiting room, then turned her attention back towards the arena and the next match. Ida and Hatsume, huh? As Ida stepped onto the stage,
It quickly became apparent that he was wearing some of Hatsume's gear. And judging by Hatsume's manic expression, she had been the one to suggest it. Era felt her grin widen. This match was either going to be very short or very long. End of chapter 35.